We are at Gamescom 2016, catching up on Hearthstone and One Night in Karazhan, a new adventure that's coming to Hearthstone. If you introduce people to it, what is it?
Sure, so this is a new adventure for Hearthstone. This is a Crazy Wizard's Tower. So Medivh is the most powerful archmage in the world, and he has this magical tower in Deadwind Pass, and it's named Karazhan. And here he throws the most amazing parties, and you are invited. And actually, for these parties, he goes all out. He enchants the silverware, he enchants his magical chess set, he's got a magical hot tub, and he invites everyone who's anyone. So there's the Demon Lord Jaraxxus, and a Murloc explorer named Finley, and of course you. And so, with all of these amazing guests and all of this amazing magic, how could anything go wrong? But by the time you show up at the party, Medivh is gone, the silverware's gone totally out of control, the crazy magical creatures in his menagerie are loose, they've gone wild, his opera has gone out of control, the stage manager is letting his actors do whatever they want, and it's a pretty crazy place. So you need to make your way through the tower, get to the top, and there's magical portals that can bring back Medivh in time to restore order and save the party.
Sounds great. I think Hearthstone has always been a little bit whimsical, but this may be taking the cake.
Yeah, it's important to us to keep being charming and fun and to find the sort of lighthearted and joyful aspects of World of Warcraft and really play them up. Karazhan is one of these really iconic raid experiences in World of Warcraft, and you look at it and there's dancers in a ballroom, but they're ghosts, and there's an opera, but it's run by monsters and by ghosts and by spirits, and we looked at that and said, this is a magical tower, and it has all of these elements to make an amazing party. I bet that was what's going on 20, 30, 50 years ago. So let's explore that and let's have fun with it.
Because there is such a treasure trove of stuff from Warcraft, World of Warcraft, to sort of to dig into and take from in terms of Hearthstone. How do you really go about that process of picking and choosing and coming up with your own stuff as well, of course, but how do you sort of cipher through everything?
So one of our values is delightful surprise. So we want to make sure that we always keep our players on their toes. So we just recently did the Whispers of the Old Gods expansion, which was a little on the spooky side, a little darker. And so we wanted to do something surprising and fun. And so Karazhan's an iconic raid. We wanted to explore that in a lighthearted way. In general, when we look at what we can do for an expansion or an adventure, we look at these are the things that players love, the things that players remember, and also the things that'll just surprise players that we can explore in a new Hearthstone way. The League of Explorers were a very small part in World of Warcraft, but we played them up and found these really cool characters, Reno Jackson, Elise Starseeker, and really made them Hearthstone's own so that we could find this delightful and fun part of World of Warcraft.
Interesting. You talk about surprising players, but it also feels like you found sort of your rhythm with updating the game, with hitting the expansion and the adventure. Is that something that we can sort of rely on? That sort of 1-2 thing is going to continue on. Is that how you envision things, or?
So we're always iterating on our structure. Hearthstone's still a very young game, so we're exploring. We had Naxxramas was the first adventure, and since then we've been doing adventure, expansion, adventure. We're still trying to figure out what exactly is the best pace for Hearthstone. How often should we deliver single-player content like One Night in Karazhan? How often should we deliver larger expansions like Whispers of the Old Gods? We're looking at how the metagame evolves in the time after an expansion and an adventure, how much time people need to really digest and explore the cards that we're releasing. And so all of that's kind of going together to figure out what our release strategy is going to be moving forward. But yeah, we like surprising people, so we're definitely not going to commit to anything.
Sounds good. What can you tell us of the metagame since Whisper of the Old Gods and how it's evolved and where it's at now? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it was actually a really cool evolution. Sort of as Whispers of the Old Gods came out, the first month or so, people tried all kinds of crazy things. There were some dominant decks that had existed in the previous format that some of them became much, much weaker, like Secret Paladin had been around and is now a very different deck. And others, like the aggressive Shaman decks, were very popular after the launch of Whispers of the Old Gods. And then sort of new decks started evolving, like Cthulhu Warrior and the Token Druid deck. And then much, much later, even as recently as a few weeks ago, we've seen new decks like Wall Shaman, which is a shaman deck using Ancestral Spirit and Earth Elementals, doing very, very well in DreamHack events, the seat story events on the professional scene. So that's seen more play in the ranked mode and in the online Hearthstone experience. So it's actually been really cool to see the metagame develop over time, over the course of those 3-4 months since Whispers of the Old Gods launched.
I can imagine that you guys, you have some idea of where the meta is going, but I can also assume that after a while, sort of you had no clue where it ends up. It's sort of like you can predict the first few steps perhaps, but then it sort of takes on a life of its own.
Sure, so we can predict the power level of cards to some extent, but yeah, we have millions and millions of players, far more than we have developers. So our players are always going to surprise us with cool new synergies, cool new decks that they've developed, and that's one of the fun parts of it. We get to see how the players take our cards and do things with it. If we could ever make Hearthstone in a place where we could solve it with our tiny development team, or then relative to the player base, then that wouldn't be any fun. The players would solve it, and it wouldn't have that strategic depth and all of that, surprise again, that's fun to explore. That's part of the core of a card game experience.
Interesting. Obviously, Hearthstone is such a special project at Blizzard because it started with such a small team doing their own thing, and it's sort of grown to be perhaps your most popular and most successful game right now. Of course, Overwatch is pretty successful as well, but certainly earning the company a lot of money and having tons and tons of players. Has the team changed much since those early days, and how many people are working on it these days?
Sure. So the team's definitely bigger now. We've sort of transitioned more from a very, very small team that's just trying to see if this product is going to work, and then there's just been this overwhelmingly positive reception, and it's really been fantastic to see how much the community, how much the gaming world in general has really taken to Hearthstone, and that's just been incredibly gratifying and just really, really cool. And so the team has grown some, but we still have that sort of tight-knit framework, and it's been really nice to see how that's evolved, and we can take advantage of a slightly larger team, but still create this cool and the same spirit that Hearthstone had at its original launch.
It's funny because Hearthstone is obviously not the first card game out there, not the first digital card game, but after the success of Hearthstone, it seems like a lot of people are sort of moving into this space. There's a lot of things going on and things. So you seem to be the sort of the trendsetter. Do you feel that? What do you think of that competition and other card games, and how do you see yourself fit into that picture?
Sure, I think that's awesome. I'm personally a huge card game fan, which is, I suppose, why I work on this game. But it's awesome to see all these new card games come up, all of these new gamers and new players that come from other backgrounds that are picking up card games and exploring the space. And it's really exciting to see them see those games and see Hearthstone with its highly accessible nature. It's very easy to get into Hearthstone because a lot of the cards read very simply. They're delightful, they're charming, they have fun pictures, fun animations, and you play a Hearthstone card and it just feels good. And so it's fun to see all of these new players come to Hearthstone and explore this game because it's accessible, and then stick around because it's so deep and there's so much strategy behind it.
So I know you got a rollout for Karazhan. What's the rollout for it if we finish off on that? When's the different wings coming out? What's the plan?
Sure. So the first wing came out about a week ago, and the second wing just came out yesterday, which is awesome. It's been really fun in the last day to see people try out all these new cards and experiment with new decks and new archetypes. And then the next 2 wings will roll out over the course of the next 2 weeks. So 1 wing next week and then 1 wing the week after. And it's really fun to see this sort of month-long rollout and see the metagame transition from the ends of Whispers of the Old Gods into sort of a few cards at a time from Karazhan that come in. It's actually really cool to see people take them and try them out. And then as other cards that synergize with them come out, we see it more and more. A good example is European preliminaries were last weekend on the competitive scene, and they were not allowed to use One Night in Karazhan cards because it just wasn't released yet. North America prelims are this weekend, and they are allowed to use the first wing, and so we've seen a number of those cards get picked up in competitive decks. And that's been really gratifying to see, and it's really cool to see people experiment with these things.
Very exciting times for the competitive scene. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
This is the place